I want to start today with something that might make some of you uncomfortable, and I'm going to say it clearly and without apology. And that is this: you do not have to forgive. Not the person who abused you, not the family member who did not show up when you needed them most, not the person who chose the side of someone who hurt your child, not the partner who betrayed you, not the parent who failed you, not anyone. You do not have to forgive. Now, I want to be clear about what I mean by that and what I don't mean, because forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood, most weaponized, most shame-laden topics in the entire landscape of healing. And today, we are going to take it apart piece by piece and look at what it actually is and what it actually isn't, and what Harriet Lerner, one of the most important voices in relational psychology, has to say about it. Welcome to Reclaiming Me, a trauma-informed podcast helping women with complex PTSD heal the lasting impact of childhood attachment wounds from parents and caregivers, so you can finally release people-pleasing and perfectionism and learn to trust in relationships, beginning with the one you have with yourself. I'm your host, Cindy Payne, therapist, trauma specialist, and a woman who has walked this path both personally and professionally. So welcome back, everybody, to another full-length episode of Reclaiming Me. And if you've been tuning in, you will know that over the past 2 weeks, we've been in the anger series, drawing from Harriet Lerner's The Dance of Anger. And if you missed those episodes, I really do encourage you to go back and listen, because what we've covered there, anger as information, changing your steps in the relational dance, over and under functioning, sets the foundation for everything we're going to be doing in these next 2 weeks. Because here is the thing: you cannot do real forgiveness work without doing the anger work first. And I mean that clinically. Forgiveness that happens before the anger has been fully processed is not forgiveness. It is suppression dressed up in spiritual language. And it doesn't actually heal anything. It just buries the wound a little deeper and puts a more socially acceptable label on the grave. So for the next 2 weeks, we are going to go deep into forgiveness through the lens of Dr. Harriet Lerner's book, Why Won't You Apologize?, which is one of the most important books that I have ever read on the topic. We're going to be talking about what forgiveness actually is and what it is not, the difference between forgiving and reconciling, what to do when the apology that you deserve never comes, how to apologize well yourself, and why you do not, under any circumstances, have to forgive anyone who has not done the work to earn it. So let's just dive right in. And before we go into the clinical content for today's episode, I want to share something personal, because forgiveness is not an abstract topic for me. Forgiveness is one of the most ongoing, most complicated, most slippery pieces of my own healing. And I think you deserve to know that. And so about 10 years ago, something happened to our family that I am going to share only in the broadest terms, because the details belong to people that I love, and it is not my story alone to tell. But what I can tell you is this: a child in my family was physically harmed by an adult, someone who should have been safe, someone who was connected to people that we trusted. We were on a family vacation and we were completely blindsided. And then in the aftermath, the people that I expected to stand beside us, people from my own family of origin, did not. Not only did they not show up the way I needed them to, but they aligned with the person who caused the harm. And I want to let that land for a second. Because if you have ever experienced something like that, you know that the original injury is devastating. But the secondary injury, the one where the people who were supposed to protect and stand with you choose the other side, that one can be just as damaging and sometimes more. And in my family of origin, we were not taught to apologize correctly. So accountability was not modeled, and repair was not something that happened cleanly or openly. So not only did I not get the apology, I got confusion, I got minimizing, I got loyalty to someone who had caused real harm to someone I love. And that experience 10 years ago made forgiveness one of the most confusing and loaded topics of my entire life. Because every time someone said, you need to forgive, I heard, you need to make this okay. You need to let this go. You need to stop being difficult about this. And folks, I couldn't. And I still haven't. Not fully, not yet. And maybe not ever in the way people mean when they use that word. And what I have learned through my own therapy, through Harriet Lerner's work, through years of sitting with clients who are navigating the same impossible terrain, is that that is okay. More than okay, actually. It is actually the most honest and self-respecting position I could take, given what happened. And today we are going to talk about why. So here's what I want to talk to you about today, and most importantly, what I want you to walk away with. And this is number one, that forgiveness is not required. Forgiveness is a personal choice, and no one, not your pastor, not your therapist, not your mother, not a well-meaning friend, gets to make that choice for you. Number two, the myths that we've been taught about forgiveness. Myths like it heals you and withholding it makes you sick. That is what good people do. They forgive. This is inaccurate information, okay? And not only is it inaccurate, it is actively harmful to survivors of trauma. And finally, number three, you do not restore your humanity by forgiving someone who has not apologized. They restore their humanity by doing the work to earn it. And that distinction right there changes everything. So segment one. So forgiveness is not required. I want to say this again. You do not have to forgive. Harriet Lerner is very clear about this in her book, Why Won't You Apologize? She says that forgiveness is a personal choice. It is not a moral obligation. It is not a spiritual requirement that supersedes your own experience of what happened. It is not something that you owe the person who hurt you, and it is not a prerequisite for your own healing. And when I first read this, it was like, oh, I feel so seen. And yet I also know what a radical statement this is in a culture, and particularly in religious communities where forgiveness has been held up as the ultimate measure of a good person, where not forgiving is treated as evidence of bitterness, of hardness of heart, of spiritual immaturity, where survivors of serious harm are regularly told by pastors, by parents, by well-meaning friends, sometimes even by medical professionals, that their healing depends on their willingness to forgive the person who hurt them. And folks, I want to say this clearly. That is not only clinically inaccurate, that is a form of harm in itself. Because what that message does for trauma survivors is it takes the focus off the person who caused the harm and it puts it back on the person who was harmed. It makes your healing contingent on your generosity towards someone who has often not earned it. And it shames you for having a completely appropriate and human response to being seriously wronged. And Lerner talks about how forgiveness has been used as a pressure campaign. And what she means by this is it's a way to rush survivors past their legitimate pain in the service of social comfort, family harmony, religious doctrine, or the perpetrator's own comfort. And she is unequivocal. That is not healing. That is compliance. So you are allowed to not forgive. You are allowed to hold the truth of what happened without packaging it into something more palatable for the people around you. You are allowed to say, what was done to me was wrong. It caused real harm. The people who did it have not taken responsibility. And I am not at a place where forgiveness is something that I can offer. And you are allowed to stay there for as long as you need to, or forever, because again, that is your right. Which leads me to takeaway number 2, the myths that we've been taught are harming us. So let's go through some of the biggest ones, because I think this is what keeps us stuck. And the first myth is not forgiving is making you sick. So if you've ever heard this, just know that you are not alone. This is one that gets repeated constantly in churches, in therapy offices, in popular culture. The idea that holding on to anger and not forgiving is what's causing your anxiety, your depression, your physical illness, your suffering. Harriet Lerner pushes back on this directly. It is not the lack of forgiveness that causes the suffering. It is the unprocessed rage. It is the lack of peace. It is the absence of acceptance, not of the other person's behavior, but of the reality of what happened and what it means now. And those are 2 different things. So Lerner believes that you can find peace. You can find acceptance. You can reduce the rage that is eating you alive, all without forgiving the person who caused it. Because the work is internal. The work does not require anything from the person who hurt you. Myth number 2, forgiving restores your humanity. And this one is, to me, is particularly insidious because it sounds generous and spiritual. This idea that when you forgive someone who wronged you, you become more fully human, more evolved, more healed. And again, Lerner flips this completely. She says that you do not restore your humanity by forgiving someone who has not apologized, someone who has not taken full and complete accountability, not just lip service, someone who has not done the work of genuine repair. The person who has caused the harm restores their own humanity by doing the work to earn forgiveness, by offering a genuine apology, by taking full and complete accountability without deflecting or minimizing, by changing their behavior, by making repair where repair is possible. And that, she says, is not your work. That is their work to do. And I have to say, when I read that, it was like such a huge aha mic drop moment for me, because it's like she's articulated everything about responsibility. And it brought me back to a time in my therapist's office trying to process what had happened to our family member. And I said, I'm really struggling with forgiveness, because what am I giving and who is it for? And we just kind of sat there and we toyed with this question, this idea, because really, what am I giving when I'm saying I forgive you? And who is it for? So I love that. Forgiving restores their humanity when they do the work. Okay, on to myth number 3. A good person forgives. This is the one that has the most cultural and religious weight behind it. And it is the one that causes the most shame for survivors who genuinely cannot get there. I've seen it time and time again. Goodness is not measured by your capacity to forgive people who have harmed you without remorse. Goodness is measured by your integrity, your care for others, your commitment to your own healing, your willingness to tell the truth about what happened. You can be an extraordinarily good person and never forgive someone who hurt you or your family and never apologized for it. In fact, I would argue that pretending to forgive when you haven't, so performing forgiveness to make others comfortable, is actually a form of dishonesty. And there is nothing particularly good about it. So takeaway number 3, and that is this, that they restore their humanity, not you. And again, this is the piece of Lerner's work that I come back to most often, both in my own life and in my clinical work with clients. And she says something that I think is one of the most important reframes in the entire conversation about forgiveness. That when someone causes serious harm and does not take accountability, does not offer a genuine apology, does not do the work of repair, they are operating from a really shaky foundation of self-worth. And sometimes there is no foundation at all, because the capacity to genuinely apologize, to say, hey, I was wrong. I caused harm. I take full responsibility. I'm not going to deflect. I'm not going to minimize. I'm not going to make this about me. I hurt you and I own that. And here's how I'm going to earn your trust back, right? That for a person to say that requires a certain groundedness in who you are. It requires the ability to sit with the discomfort of having hurt someone without collapsing into shame so overwhelming that you have to protect yourself by denying it. And people who cannot apologize are not strong. They are fragile in a very specific way. Their sense of self cannot tolerate the weight of accountability. And understanding that does not mean excusing what they did. It doesn't mean the harm was less real. It means that you understand something true about why the apology never came. And sometimes that understanding, not forgiveness, just understanding, is what creates a little bit of space between you and the wound, and it allows you to start to do the healing. The person who harmed you or someone you love restores their own humanity when they do that work, when they choose accountability over self-protection, when they prioritize repair over ego. That is their job. That is not your job. Your job is to find a way to live with what happened without it consuming you. And that is entirely possible without forgiving someone who has never earned it. Believe me on this one, because this is the final stretch of road I had to walk to really let that marinate and really get that. And it is possible. You can live with what happened without it consuming you, without ever forgiving that person. So here is what I want you to hold on from today. Okay. Number one, forgiveness is not required. Forgiveness is a personal choice that belongs to you entirely. Nobody gets to make it for you or shame you for where you are with that. Okay. Number two, the myths that we have been taught about forgiveness, they're not only wrong, they're actively harmful to survivors. The work is finding peace and reducing rage. That does not require forgiving anybody. And number three, you do not restore your humanity by forgiving someone who has not apologized. They restore their humanity by doing the work to earn it. And that is their work. That is not your work. So I hope that today's episode was helpful. It was pretty direct and straightforward from what I usually talk on, but this is obviously a topic that is close to my heart and I get extremely passionate about it. And I want so deeply for complex trauma survivors in family of origin where most of this stuff started to understand this concept because it's so huge and it can be so freeing. And on Wednesday, I'm going to give you a practical framework for thinking about forgiveness in percentages because Harriet Lerner offers something really useful here that takes the all or nothing pressure just completely off the table. So you don't have to be at 0 or 100. You are allowed to just hang out somewhere in between and stay there as long as you need to. And on Monday of next week, we are going to go deeper into one of the most important distinctions in this entire conversation. And that is the difference between forgiving and reconciling, because these are not the same thing. And understanding the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation might be one of the most liberating things that you hear in this series. So if today's episode brought something up inside of you, please know that you are not alone. And if you've been carrying shame about where you are with forgiveness, I hope from the bottom of my heart that something today gave you a little room to breathe. And if you have a question about complex PTSD that you would like for me to answer on the podcast, this is the last week that I'll be taking listener questions for the 2-part Ask Me Anything series. And all of my contact information is in the show notes. So please take a moment to rate and review wherever you listen because this helps more people find this work. And I'm just so grateful you're here. So until Wednesday, take good care of yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you leave feeling a little lighter, a little more grounded, and a little closer to trusting yourself and your inner experience. If this episode resonated with you, please follow or subscribe so future conversations can meet you when they're needed. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, consider sharing this episode with them. That's one of the ways this work reaches the people who need it the most. You can find me on Instagram at Cindy Payne Rooted, and you can also visit me at cindypayne.com, where you'll find all episode links, blog posts, practice updates, and a free people-pleasing style quiz designed to help you notice your patterns with more compassion. And remember, every small step towards healing, self-trust, and presence matters. You are worthy of this journey. Thanks, everyone.